everybody. This is Jana with Purl Together, and I'm here today with Tracy from the Needlepoint Joint in Ogden, Utah. One of my absolute favorite knitting stores, yarn store. They do lots of things. So Tracy is going to help us talk about colors for our upcoming knit along to benefit the MRI appeal in Shetland. We'll put all the links down below for that. But this knit along will begin January 1st. It'll go January 1st to January 31st. And Tracy has a lot of experience with Fair Isle knitting and has graciously agreed to join me on today's podcast to talk about your color selections and how you can get your yarn directly from Needlepoint Joint. Welcome.
All right. Well, thanks. Thanks, Jana. Thanks for having me. Fair Isle knitting is one of my all-time passionate things with knitting. It's my favorite type of knitting to do, and I've done a lot of it. And a couple of years ago, I actually had the opportunity to go to Shetland. So I have visited Jamieson and Smith and Jamieson and various farms and whatnot and brought back tons of yarn. So I'm really excited that you asked me to help with this. So I know you guys are going to be knitting the variety of patterns, Harriet's hat, the mittens or the gloves and the headband and all the different things.
Yeah.
So
from the whole collection, and I'll put all the links down below for the whole collection of how people can get those.
Right. So the pattern, you have to actually order the pattern from their website.
Right, from the MRI Maakers. Mm-hmm.
Right, and all the proceeds of the pattern sales are what go toward the purchase of the scanner. Yeah. But what Needlepoint Joint has to offer is we've put together 4 kits for your listeners. And I actually made them live this morning. So you can go to needlepointjoint.com, and in the search bar, you can type in Harriet's Hat Kit, and there is an apostrophe S behind Harriet's. Okay. And then there are pictures of all 4 of the colorways. So the traditional one, which you see in the picture of the pattern, and then I've put together a warm palette, a neutral gray palette, and a red, or like my boss likes to call it, a romantic palette. So there's different colorways, and as we get going, I can show those. But some of the details about how to order, you can just put your selection in the cart, and if you type in Harriet MRI, you will get 10% off your whole cart, but you must have a Harriet's Hat Kit in your cart in order to qualify for that 10% discount.
Okay, so let me clarify. The code is Harriet with no S or apostrophe.
Right, and no space. So okay. It's HARRIETMRI.
Fantastic. And we'll make sure everybody understands that.
Right, and cool. So then whatever else you want to shop and put in your cart, the 10% off will apply. It's a one-time purchase only,
right,
to get the discount. So if for some reason you want to choose completely different colors, we also have all the colors of Jamieson and Smith in the 25-gram balls, and you can order them off of our website as well, and it's $5 a ball for the individual balls.
Great. Okay? So my question would be, how long will that discount code be available? So how long do people have?
It's available right now through December 31st.
Fantastic. That's
so you have a whole month to decide what you want, what colors and whatnot. And once you place your order, we typically get it out as soon as possible. Our mail order person, he works on certain days and then he packages them up and sends them out. So, depending on where you live in relation to Ogden, Utah, it might take a day, 2 days, it might take a week. It just depends. So right, but they're really prompt about getting them out.
Yeah, they are. Every time I've ordered from you guys, it's been pretty quick. Yeah, you ship priority mail. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Great. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see the colors.
Okay, do you want to see them now?
Yes.
Okay, these are the colors that you will see in the pattern.
Yay.
So those are the traditional ones, the 6 colors.
Okay.
And on our website, under each of the, well, actually under that product, Harriet's Hat Kit, in the remarks section, you can see which color is yarn A, which is B, C, D. They coordinate with the actual pattern. And then this is the warm palette. Yeah, there's a dark brown, a rust, kind of an orangey color, a tan, a cream, and then the gold is that pop color.
And so, and in the remarks, I could like just take a screenshot of that for when I get ready to knit, like, because I'm a beginner with Fair Isle. So, I mean, I've done some 2-color, but not like this. And so I could just take a screen or just jot that down. So when I get ready to begin my pattern, I could paste that over and I would know which was A, B, C to follow the. Okay.
Right. So I have another helpful hint for that.
Okay.
So before I show you the other 2 colorways, when I have a class and I'm teaching people, you know, how to do this and how to keep track of their colors, what I have my students do is I'll have them take a little snip, maybe 1.5 inches of each color, and well, make 2 snips. One, you're going to tape it to the ball band of the color, so that if the ball band gets misplaced from your actual ball of yarn, you know what color goes with the color number. And then in the pattern itself, if you're not using the colors that are specified in the pattern, like if you choose one of these other colorways, I have them label. You can either put it on a separate card or you can tape it right on a copy of your pattern and just yarn A with the actual snippet piece of yarn. So as you're working through the pattern, when it calls for color A, you can look at your map, your pattern, and say, okay, for me, yarn A is going to be dark brown. I think just taking a separate piece of paper and writing yarn A, B, C, D, and then putting the actual piece of yarn, taping it to the name. Right. And then when you're looking at the chart, you're going to have to do a little bit of translating because they've got theirs color coded. Right. Printed on the pattern. Even if you printed it in black and white, you're still going to have a hard time distinguishing because a couple of the blues are really hard to tell the difference of. So
I like your idea though of making just that little snippet and taping it on there.
Actual yarn, and I do that. I even still do that, and I've been knitting for a long time. So no matter what I'm doing, and then I have it, and so then maybe a couple of years from now, I go, well, what color how did I have that placed? And I just go back and look at my little map, and I'm like, oh yeah, yarn A is this, B is that, and I don't have to think about it. I don't have to guess. And then if my ball bands are, if I run out, I can go look at the ball band and know the color number.
That's fantastic, and that's a really good plug for the traditional 3-ring binder. Like, just keep your stuff.
Yes.
I mean, I don't mind Knit Companion. I don't mind that. I'm not very good at it, but I mean, I understand the value of that. But this is a compelling reason to do the traditional 3-ring binder. Just keep your stuff.
Just old school. I mean, it's not hard. Just, something, you got it all covered. So, okay, the next colorway is the neutral grays. There we go.
Oh, with a little pop of red.
The pop of red is what really makes it.
Oh.
So you've got 4 graduated shades of gray, the charcoal, dark gray, medium gray, light gray, cream, and then the red. So beautiful.
Lovely.
So that's that one.
You're right. I want them all.
And last but not least, this one is the romantic one.
Oh, also lovely.
For all the people out there who love red, you've got a dark burgundy, and then kind of a heathery burgundy, and then more into kind of a salmony, pinkish red, pink, white, and then that charcoal again is your pop color.
That's fantastic. And people, Valentines is coming. I'm just saying.
Oh, yes. That would be a beautiful Valentine's gift.
Mm-hmm. For someone, and Mother's Day as well. I'm just saying, if we are doing the knit along, sometimes it takes some of us a long time to get through a more complicated project, or if you're new to Fair Isle, you might need a little extra time.
Yeah.
But that's amazing. You guys have done a fantastic job. Thank you for putting those together.
I want to make them all.
Yes, I might have to.
Yes.
Well, and I don't know if the viewers, if you haven't watched the podcast that I did with Anne Frost, she's co-hosting the Knit Along from the I Thought I Knew How podcast. She has made several of she's made all of the Shetland wool week hats, all 6 or 7 of them.
Yeah.
And so she showed those on the podcast. They're just, she's into it. She's just all about the Fair Isle. And I have a feeling I will be too.
It's so much fun. It's so exciting as you start knitting your pattern and the colors reveal themselves and you just can't stop. I want to see what the next color does.
And then you stay up too late, right? Anne and I are going to be doing some technique videos about, specific things. But I wondered, since you also teach Fair Isle and it's your absolute favorite thing, I wonder if you could just give us an overview or some cursory tips suggestions that you might have for people that are just beginning.
Okay. The biggest thing about Fair Isle is tension, because you're going to be knitting with 2 colors. And just for clarification, Fair Isle is a form of stranded colorwork knitting. It's specifically, to be called Fair Isle, you only use 2 colors per row.
Right.
So if there's more than 2, then it's stranded knitting, but not necessarily Fair Isle.
So that's a really helpful hint, though, because if people feel a little intimidated, not to worry. It's only 2 per row, and then maybe you switch, but it's only 2 at a time.
Correct. So there's a couple of different ways you can hold the yarn. The simplest way is what I call the drop and pick up method. So you pick up the one that you're knitting with, because you're going to be knitting on the right side of your item the entire time. So there's no purling.
Okay.
So if you're a continental knitter, you hold your yarn in your left hand, or if you're a European, you hold it in your right hand. You would just pick up the yarn that you're working with, knit, 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 drop that one when it's time for a color change, and pick up the next one.
Okay.
Now, what I highly recommend, and I pretty much demand that my students do this, is when you're looking at the pattern, there's a background color and a pattern color.
Okay.
So when you're knitting with the background color stays on your right side all the time. Your pattern color stays on your left side all the time. If you follow that, when you're knitting, you will never get your yarn balls all twisted around each other, and it'll be all weird and whatnot. And so by doing that, keeping pattern on right side, background on right side, pattern on left side, you'll never get confused over which is which. So
let me ask you this. I think I have been doing it all these years. I think I've been doing it backwards, where I had my dominant pattern color on the right and my background on the left. So why does it matter which is which?
It's called yarn dominance.
Right. I've heard of that and not understood it.
Right. So what yarn dominance is, it really has to do with the physical distances from where you're knitting and where your yarn is. So if you're holding your yarn on your left side, that's your pattern side. That's going to be more dominant, because that yarn's going to travel underneath. The float is going to travel underneath the background color, which is held in your right hand. So some people will say it really doesn't matter as long as you're consistent. So if you always hold your pattern color in your right hand and you always have your background color in your left hand, if you switch them, if you make swatches and switch them, you will notice that whatever color you have in your left hand is going to be more dominant, appear bigger, puffier, more to the forefront than your background color, which when
even if you're doing the drop and pick up method and you're not trying to knit continental with one hand?
Yes, because the yarn travels a different distance, whether you're holding it on this side or this side. So if you're holding it on the left side, it because of the distance that it travels, it looks more prominent in your knitting.
Interesting. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So there is something to it. Some people poo-poo it, but honestly, it's a real thing.
No, we believe you. You've been doing it enough to know. Like, I don't know, but I'm going to put some notes down below for people to understand. So that's pattern on the left, background on the right.
Correct.
Okay.
So when you're doing that, so that kind of helps make the case for learning how to knit with one color in each hand.
Right.
So when you first learn to knit, it was confusing and awkward and felt really weird and whatever. And so, for whatever reason and however you learn to knit, some people learn to knit holding the yarn in their right hand. Some people learn in their left hand. Whatever way you learn, that's fine. But it will really benefit you as a knitter and your growth as becoming a better knitter to learn how to knit with the other hand. Mm-hmm. So there's so many patterns that are out there that I can't tell you that I've been going along, because I'm naturally a right hand holder of my yarn, but I forced myself to learn how to knit continental. I did a whole cowl, a whole cape shawl thing, just forcing myself to use my left hand just so I could learn and get comfortable with it. Because then it's an easy step to go, okay, I'm going to have pattern colored in my left hand, background color in my right, and I'm going to do one of each. Knit with this hand, knit with this hand, knit with this hand. Yarns are separate physically on either side of your body, and you never get messed up.
Fantastic.
Some people are really talented and can knit with two colors on one hand.
I've seen that.
Yeah, so whether it's two colors on your right hand, two colors in your left hand, if that is a comfortable method for you, then by all means do that. But still keep the left side of your finger pattern, right side of your finger background, whether it's the right hand or the left hand.
Well, and you're physically separating the balls of yarn on each side, like you mentioned, on each side of your body.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
And you're physically keeping them the same on your finger if you're going to do it that way. If you're going to have two on one hand, left side, right side.
Okay.
Left side, right side.
Have you tried the thimble thingy?
No, I haven't. I'm kind of anti-gizmo. I'm like, it's like, just learn it. If you learn how to do it just the basic old school way, you'll never freak out if your gizmo isn't available.
Well, if you can't find your gizmo or you lost it.
Right. If you lose it, if you can't find it, then you're like, oh, I can't do things. Yes, you can. Just learn how to do it. And then if you want to add a gizmo thingy later, that's fine. But if you lose it, then you're still going to be able to make your thing.
I totally agree. I have seen, I can't remember where now, somebody that was able to tension their yarn around their forefinger and their middle finger.
Right. Some people, there's a million ways to hold your yarn. And so likewise, if you have two yarns in one hand, some people will tension one color over the index finger and some will tension the second color over the middle finger. I haven't been able to figure that out.
I tried it. I'm like, no.
No, my normal method is one in each hand, but if you have to, or I can also do two in one hand, my right hand.
Okay.
So I can do that, but I just think, it's really good balance to do one in each hand because you can just move along and your yarns are always separate and your your stitches are even and
sure.
And you just keep motoring along.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it's really good practice. So if you're newer, do you have a suggestion? Like I mentioned in my email to you, like I think I might try to do the headband for a couple of reasons. One is because I want to demonstrate on video the provisional cast on. I want to show people how to do that if they've never done it before.
Okay.
And I know that, I might do the hat. I can't decide. There's just so many things, not enough time.
Yeah.
However, one thing, if you're a little uncertain about your tension, is there I figured the cowl or the headband would be cool to do if I'm a little unsure, because it can just be a cowl if I screw it up and it's too big.
Well, I suggest either the cowl is going to be a lot because it's double-sided.
Right.
And the hat, if you've knit hats before, the hat's going to be just fine to do that as well. So either one of those is fine. But back on your question about tension. So once you figure out what hand you want to hold your yarn in and all that sort of stuff, as you're knitting, you want to make sure that your floats, which is the yarn that you're not knitting with on the back side of your work, you want to make sure that it's not too tight and not too loose. And what I like to tell people is if you can fit on your needle, okay, you're going to have one color and then you'll have your other color. And if you can fit one width's worth of yarn between the two stitches, then your tension and your float is probably going to be okay. You don't want the float to be too floppy, because then your thing will be floppy. If it's too tight, it's going to pucker.
Right.
So as you're knitting along, you want to consciously, gently be moving, spreading your stitches out on the right-hand needle so that your float lays flat behind your work. And you can test that by taking a width of your yarn that you're using and placing it between your stitches. If your stitches are close together like this and you can't get any yarn between them, they're too tight.
Okay.
If your stitches are this far apart and you can get 3 widths of your yarn that you're using between them, then they're too loose.
Right.
So just kind of generally, if you can get, if there's 1 width's worth of yarn between your stitches, your floats should be fine.
And that's good to know, because, and the other thing, I think if people are concerned about, seeing space between their stitches, know that when you wash it and block it, it will bloom.
It will.
And those spaces will fill in.
Right. It's better to be a little too loose than too tight. Because, you can stretch, and Shetland is very forgiving. You can stretch it quite a bit. Okay. But you don't want to stretch it to within an inch of its life, because then there's no, elasticity or anything else to it. It's just this flat, lifeless thing.
I'm really excited to start. I think the only other questions I had for beginners and for myself is I've done some Fair Isle work in the past where I have not. I weave in the ends as I go, and so that was a technique that we're going to show on video as well. And so, would you recommend? Do you prefer that, or do you prefer to just leave it and then weave everything in at the end, or is it just personal preference?
It's kind of personal preference, but there's actually many things you can do. So for beginners, if all of this weaving in as you go and all this other stuff is kind of a little too scary, just pick up the color and start knitting with the one that you need. When you're done with it, just cut it, leave a tail, and I tie my ends in a bow, and then you can go in and weave them in later, because never knot your ends, because you're going to want to adjust the tension. And weaving them in a bow, when you're done, you can pull gently on those stitches and line up where you made color changes so that it matches the rest of the tension of your item.
Okay, fantastic.
So that's like beginner. Just leave them, start knitting, and then tie them in little bows and come back and weave them in later. Option 2 is weave them in as you go, so you kind of catch them in the back as you're going along. In
the same way that you do the catch floats.
Correct.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, so you can start your yarn a little bit ahead of time, and then when it's ready to go. The third method is spit splicing. That's a little more complex, and it would really, it would be hard for me to teach it and show it here. But just know that as you get more advanced, spit splicing is the way to go, because you have no ends to weave in when you're done.
All right. Well, and if I can get myself together, if I can arrange with you to do a class for us at our fall retreat, then that might be, we would love to have you show us that.
I would love to, because it's magic. It will change. Being able to spit splice and have your color start right on stitch number 1 when you want it is magic.
Oh, I want to do that.
Yes, you do. If you're going to do Fair Isle, you want to learn how to do that.
Do we have anything else we need to tell newer people?
Don't be afraid. It's only yarn. It doesn't have feelings. So, and if you need to unknit a little bit, actually, I do want to talk about that. I want to talk about your pattern and keeping track of where you are in your pattern. So if you don't have highlighter tape, highly recommend it. And when
you could send us some of that.
What's that?
You could send some highlighter tape.
You can order it from our website.
Add it to your cart.
Add it to the cart, yep. And when you're doing Fair Isle and following a chart, you keep your highlighter tape on the row above the one that you're working. So the row of the chart immediately below the highlighter tape is the one that you're on.
Yeah.
And because you want to see all the previous rounds or rows that you have done. Also, if there is a pattern repeat, which there is, let me get the pattern out again. It looks like there's an 18 stitch pattern repeat.
Okay.
You will want to use markers. You're going to have your beginning of round marker. After you knit those 18 stitches in the repeat, place another marker. And then continue on. And when you finish your 18 stitch repeat, go back and check your row. It's much easier to correct a single repeat if you've messed up than it is to undo a whole row or many rows if you notice you've goofed up your pattern.
Yeah, so I don't normally knit with lifelines. I know people do. I've really only knitted with lifelines for the purpose of a video because people have asked me about it.
Yeah.
And what's hilarious to me is like my mother's been knitting 50 some odd years, and until like last month, she didn't even know what I was talking about. She never ever uses it.
Right.
She's done these huge Shetland lace traditional patterns, massive shawls. She's like, what?
What?
What are you talking about?
For something this small, I mean, you could put a lifeline in, but if I don't know, I use them, or I have used them on bigger projects, and mostly for stuff that's really hard to fix, like lace.
Right.
But when you're just doing the knit stitch, it's not that big of a deal. I mean, if you need to take something out, Shetland wool is very sticky, which you'll find, and you can pull it out and it will still hold the loop. So
yeah, so it's not going to dissolve into a puddle. It will stay there for you, like in its loopy shape.
Yeah, and you can go back and pick up whatever you need to pick up. So don't be afraid of that. But
I really like your suggestion of, when you finish a repeat, just take 20 seconds, make sure you've done your 3-1-3-1 or whatever it is, whatever that is, until you move on to the next. That's a fantastic, just taking a little time to double check your work.
Yeah,
saves
a ton of heartache and screaming and cussing later on.
Yes. We don't need Fair Isle swearing.
No. And after a while, you'll get into a rhythm. I mean, I kind of talk to myself. One, 1, 1, 1, or 1, 2, 1, 2, 2, or whatever it is, and you'll get that pattern, and it becomes kind of like a meditative mantra that you repeat as you go along on your row. And then you can also keep track of your pattern. In this particular pattern, there is a definite center column, and you can tell if you have gotten off pattern if your center column doesn't match.
Right.
You'll know, I've goofed up somewhere.
There's little points of checking in, right?
Yeah, just keep looking at your pattern. Go, I should be 3, 2, 2, and there's the wrong color. I better go see what I goofed up.
Yeah.
So
because it's my sense that, having only done a little bit of Fair Isle in the past and not super complicated, but like, it's my sense that if you drop a stitch, it's not going to work so well to ladder down.
You can ladder down to pick up a stitch, but if you have to change the color of the stitch, that's an issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So double check your stuff. Just
double check. If all else fails and you've completed your thing, or you're about to complete your thing, and you notice, oh man, I've missed a color, or I missed a stitch or two here in the wrong color, you can always duplicate stitch over it in the correct color. So,
true.
I mean, that's an option. So if somebody says, oh man, that one stitch was supposed to be blue instead of yellow, you can go in and put a blue one over the top of it, and it'll be just fine.
And that's a whole other technique video. I must admit, I haven't done a lot of duplicate stitching. I just haven't had an occasion to need to.
Yeah. Well, but it's just, I just throw it out there as an option, as opposed to unknitting your entire thing to fix one stitch.
Yeah. Well, true.
Yeah.
That's a good tip for sure.
Yeah.
And if people aren't sure what duplicate stitch means, it's just you're taking a darning needle and you're just following the stitch that you need to change, and you're just going in and going exactly over it, duplicating and going over it, and then back in, and then weaving the ends in somewhere.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and Shetland is really terrific for weaving in your ends, because it just felt upon itself. So as you block it, I don't know if you've talked about blocking.
We haven't yet.
Okay, so I don't know if this pattern has instructions, but when you wash your hat or scarf or headband or whatever you're going to make, and you're letting it dry, if you're making the hat, you can actually dry the hat on a balloon, a Tupperware bowl that might be the right size that you have in your kitchen somewhere, a wig stand. Some people have a wig stand. You can dry it on your own head if you want, or the person's head that you're going to give it to if it needs to be a little bit bigger than it is. So there's a lot of options. You can also just dry it flat. Just let it, wash it, and then gently squish the water out, roll it up in a towel, and then just let it dry.
And when you say wash it, I take that to mean let's just put it in a sink full of water and let it bloom for a little while. Let it sit there. We're not like wash.
No, you don't. You definitely don't want to agitate, because if you agitate this, it will felt.
Yeah.
So just let it soak. Some people say 15 minutes. Some people say 20. Some say overnight. 20 minutes is probably sufficient.
Yeah, I'll do a video on that. I do have a video on my channel about blocking your knits, but I'll do one specifically for this knit along.
Yeah.
Because we're gonna have a whole playlist about the knit along. So
cool.
Yeah. And I was having a vision of like wig stands from the 70s, the styrofoam heads and the
Yeah, I have a styrofoam head. I don't use it all the time, but it works great.
Oh.
But you can find those at like a secondhand store
for
50 cents. And you go, here's my hat blocking thing, and then you put it in the closet when you're not using it, and
for Halloween. There's multiple uses.
Yes, exactly. So
I remember getting in serious trouble as a child when I wanted to decorate my mother's wig head.
Oh yes. Well, there are actually really nice ones out there, like hat stands that you can buy. All kinds of different things. But what we didn't talk about were swatching. There's a couple of methods that you can use for swatching. Knitting Jameson flat, your gauge will not be the same as knitting color work in the round. So there's a couple of things. There's a speed swatch that you can do. So there's two methods for making a speed swatch. One is you can just choose a certain smaller number of stitches so that you can make a little cuff, about like so, like if you were doing the cuff of a mitten, and you can so in this case, it's 18 stitches. Maybe you're going to do 3 repeats in a circle on double points, using the colors, following the pattern, washing it, blocking it, and then taking your gauge.
Okay.
So that is a true measurement of your knitting, that pattern, that yarn, that needle, and the gauge that you get.
Okay.
That's not really a speed swatch. It kind of is, but not really. The other method is you knit flat with both colors of the row. Then you cut both of those colors at the end of the row, slide your stitches back to the other side of the circular needle, join the 2 colors that you need, knit across, clip the colors, slide your stitches back so you're always knitting on the right side.
Right.
Just join the 2 colors every single row that you need to use.
Okay.
A similar method is join the 2 colors that you need, knit across. If you need those same 2 colors for the next 3 or 4 rows, then you take a big float behind your hand. You just take those 2 colors behind you and start knitting with them again until you don't need them anymore. When you're done, you're going to have your flat knitting and then a big bunch of floats behind you that you then cut up the center, flatten out your swatch, block it, and then check your gauge.
Interesting.
So that's really what a speed swatch is.
Okay.
You're not actually knitting the whole thing in the round. You're simulating by carrying those 2 yarns behind you.
Right. Interesting. I'll decide what I want to do. I was thinking if I made a tube, I'm like, I could just put it on my coffee cup.
You can do that too. That's kind of the first method. Yeah.
I mean my travel mug, not like one with a handle, because then I don't know about the sticking and the buttonhole and I don't know about all that yet because I haven't taken your class.
Yes.
But I will. And I also, my big travel mug that's,
perfect.
That would make me happy to have that on my desk.
That's a perfect swatch.
thinking of all these things. Like I could put it around a plastic cup and then put my pins on it. It would make me happy to have a Fair Isle something on my desk.
Yes. So the swatches are good for color, for checking your colors. So if you're not using somebody else's color palette,
If you're
not sure if you like the way the colors play, because colors individually look way different when you knit them with their neighbor.
Right.
Color affects the other one.
Sure.
So you use it for color checking and for gauge.
Okay, so which of those three methods would you suggest for the beginners?
I would go ahead and suggest the cuff. Just let them continue knitting in the round, because dealing with all the ends gets to be really fiddly and kind of annoying.
Right.
And so if you're just knitting in the round, a little, small circumference thing, travel mug size, whatever.
Yeah.
You're just going to be happy as a clam, and there's no weird ends.
Yeah, there's no stress about all the dangle.
Yeah. Right. And plus, what that also does is it lets you get familiar with the pattern before you actually make the thing that you want.
Right. So do you take out your swatch or do you keep it?
Oh, I always keep all my swatches.
Well, then I think then you could, if you don't want it for your travel mug, you could put it in your binder, and that shows you how the colors all work together.
Absolutely.
Because like you said, little individual stitches next to each other look very different than me just holding up this pile of stuff, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a fantastic suggestion. So the only other thing that comes to mind when we talk about knitting a swatch is keeping your swatch of manageable size, because you don't want to use so much yarn.
Right.
Now, what I understand from Anne is that if you have, the regular Jamieson's and Smith in 125 yard skeins or balls, you would have enough volume. You would have enough of this to knit 2 hats. Now, I don't know if your big swatch is going to impact that, or
I don't really know. I don't know. I mean, usually your swatch is only going to be so big, but if you're making a little cuff, if I were going to do this, I would do maybe 3 repeats of the pattern and knit the full chart, which is only 19 rows.
Okay.
So it's only going to be that tall and that big around.
Okay.
That's not going to eat into your yarn. And if all else fails, you can unravel your swatch and use that yarn if you absolutely have to.
If you got in a pickle and you had to. So what I understand is you can knit 2 hats out of a selection of 6 colors of the full balls.
If she's already knit one, then she's already done that homework. Yeah.
And then the other thing is, if you wanted to make the headband, for example, obviously that's taller and it folds over, so it takes up more yarn. If you needed to order extra, you might need extra blue and royal blue and extra white. However, I'm sure Tracy and the people at Needlepoint Joint can hook you up if you need a little extra later on.
Yes, in fact, I was going to mention that. Our Jamieson are full. We have every color, and they are $5 a ball. So our website will tell you how many we have in stock.
Okay.
Of each of the individual colors, but we are right now preparing our order. So we're inventorying and then, filling in where we need to. So if you order something and whatnot, if we don't have any of it today, we'll have some in a couple weeks once we get our order.
Okay. So, and the purpose of opening up your carts and the kits and all that, the purpose of you having that available on the website right now is we're wanting to take some pre-orders so that you all have an idea of how many kits all of our viewers are going to need, so you can be assured that you'll make your giant Jamieson's order from Shetland and have enough for everybody. So this is a pre-order time right now. Yeah. And you'll ship what you have in stock, but if there is something that's needed that you don't have, you'll be making your giant order shortly.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Awesome. So highly encourage people to go out there. And if you want to buy more than one kit, you can do that too if you can't decide on which color. So the kits are their kits are online right now for $30. You'll get 6 balls. So, and then with a 10% discount, it takes it to $27.
And then you get the 10% off all the other stuff you add to your cart, like needles and the highlighter tape and all the other nifty things.
And a magnetic board that you can put your pattern on and keep track of your charts with.
Because we like the old school.
Yes.
So before I let you go, Tracy, you have some books there about Fair Isle knitting that people can order if they want to, if they're interested in learning more about the history of Fair Isle and the color theory and all that.
So I have a couple of really good books that I highly recommend. There's many more out there, but I just brought 2 with me today. So the first one is this 200 Fair Isle Motifs, a Knitter's Directory by Mary Jane Mucklestone.
Oh, so that's like a Stitch dictionary for Fair Isle.
Yes, it is phenomenal. She talks about technique. She talks about color dominance, like what we were talking about before, and she explains it in much more detail. She's got pictures of what it looks like if you hold your yarn, your pattern in your left hand or your right hand, and you can tell the difference in the pictures. And she talks about the different ways to carry the yarn, either one in each hand or 2 on one hand, and all the various details. And there's also then in the back all these different patterns of Fair Isle and colorways. It's just phenomenal.
If you wanted to choose your own adventure kind of situation.
Yes. This is an essential book if you want to become a skilled Fair Isle knitter. That's book number 1. Book number 2 that I brought is The Art of Fair Isle Knitting by Anne Feidelson. Her book also has some history and some motifs and some explanation about colors and color dominance and, you know, all the typical kinds of things. So we have that one. There's another book by Alice Starmore, which I did not bring with me, but I'm not sure if we have any in stock in the shop right now. I know both of those we should have, and if we don't have any in stock, then we can get them. You can order them or send us a note and say, hey, I want this book, and we'll get it.
Fantastic.
So awesome.
Tracy, you're delightful. Thank you for joining me.
Too.
All right. Well, if we have any other questions, we'll let you know. But if people need to contact you about their cart or if they have any questions, all the information, you guys are really fantastic about answering email quickly. I mean, usually within an hour, someone has always answered me back. And you guys have your phone as well.
Yeah.
So people can call if they have questions, but hop on the website. All the stuff is there.
Yes, needlepointjoint.com. Super easy.
Yay. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me.